Grit and grace, that's how we grow. Step by step and child by child we know. There's power in the words we say. We lift the voices, light the way. Grit and grace, it's a journey we all share. For every child, everywhere.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Grit and Grace, a literacy journey. I'm your host, Gretchen Hanlon, and in this podcast series, I'll be interviewing and talking with my mother, Angela Hanlon, a former teacher, administrator, and now educational consultant who has proven that it's possible to bring literacy to all. Okay, let's go ahead and dive in. Today, in our first episode, we will be working to build a relationship with our audience by sharing a little bit about ourselves. As educators, we know the importance of building relationships and making our students feel comfortable to set them up for success. So that's what we will be doing here with you today. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn it over to my mother, and she's quickly going to introduce what Grit and Grace is and the hopes, what we want this podcast to be, and what we want to achieve.
Hello, everyone. And as Gretchen just said, welcome to Grit and Grace, a literacy journey. We are so excited to have you join us. Transforming literacy is exactly that. It is a journey. And for many educators, especially those who are transitioning from a balanced literacy approach to a structured literacy approach, it is truly a journey that requires both perseverance and compassion. I have lived that and I know that. That is why part of the reason why we chose the name Grit and Grace, because true change demands both. So this space is going to be a podcast for educators to learn the strategies and practices that they need to use in their classrooms, that we all need to implement to reach all students. Yes, all. All means all, exclamation mark. It is a place for you to gather, to be inspired, and to learn. And we will also sprinkle in stories from individuals who have overcome learning obstacles like dyslexia to achieve their goals and truly make a difference in the world. As educators ourselves, Gretchen and I both understand just how tough, but also how incredibly rewarding this work in literacy and education can be. We've lived the grit, we've leaned on grace, and now we're here to walk alongside you. Our hope is that this podcast helps you reconnect with your why and equips you with the inspiration and tools to create a lasting impact in your classroom or school. So we are ready to jump right in.
Okay, so we're going to get started and we're going to explain the roles that we've had in educations ourselves. So I'm going to turn it over to Angela. Please share with us, what have your roles in education been?
Well, I've spent nearly 30 years in the field of education, and every step along the way has truly shaped who I am as an educator and also a person. I started out as an elementary teacher. My first job was a third grade teacher. I have always, in my teaching career in the classroom, I worked with students in grades 3 through 5. And as you well know, I absolutely loved it. Those early years in the classroom taught me so much about the joy of learning, the power of connection to students, seeing them learn, have their aha moments. And I absolutely loved it. From there, I left the classroom and I stepped into the role of K-12 instructional coach. And I also added curriculum and instruction coordinator, professional development coordinator, and then that eventually led into district work around data and also continuous improvement and leadership mentoring. After that, I had the extreme privilege of serving as an elementary principal for 6 years in a small rural town in southeast Missouri at Matthews Elementary, where I had the incredible opportunity to work alongside an extremely dedicated team of educators to truly transform a struggling school. And that experience for me was completely life changing. And then after that experience, I moved to Wisconsin to serve as a district administrator for 3 years. And I've truly valued each role I've had in education. But I must say, and I think you probably could already guess this, I must say that being an elementary principal, that role actually holds a very special place in my heart. Of all of them, that was probably my favorite role. That is where I saw firsthand just how powerful it can be when a school community comes together for kids and what it takes to truly transform education. So now tell us about your journey.
Okay, so when I first graduated college, I got a job teaching first grade. I spent 2 years teaching first grade and I liked it. I felt that I was, making a difference in the lives of my students, but I just really felt that I could do more and I wanted to explore a different age level. So from there, I taught sixth grade ELA and I absolutely loved it. I connected with those kids, and together we connected with the text that we were studying and the writing that we were doing, and just true magic happened in that classroom. From there, I had some changes in my life, so I moved to Wisconsin and I accepted a job to teach high school English. And so I worked with sophomores, juniors, and seniors. And again, I loved the text that I was digging into with those kids. But I just didn't quite feel the success for my students that I felt when I taught sixth grade ELA. So I was like, maybe I need to try to change grade level again. So then I ended up going back to my roots and I started teaching 4K. And once again, 4K, just like when I taught sixth grade, every single moment in that classroom is magical. And I love it. I love the age of the child. Oh my gosh, when they're 4 and they're just still kind of new to the world and everything is fun and it's exciting. And they really, for the first time, they feel their brain start learning. And it's incredible. Most times parents at home, you're going over colors and counting, but there's something about when they get into that classroom and they see letters and they make that connection of, oh my gosh, this makes a sound. And the words that I say are made up of these letters and these sounds. Revolutionary. So I have loved sixth grade ELA. I have loved 4K. I recently, my district asked if I would be willing to move to fourth grade. And I said yes, because I feel like that might be where those two age levels really meet in the middle. I can do the work that I love with the struggling learners, and I can really get into teaching how to read. But then with my kids that are on grade level, I can really just get into what it means to read, reading for understanding, taking that rich text and tearing it apart. So I feel like that will be a good place for me in combining all of the things that I love to do. But I am going to miss the 4-year-olds because, they're just cute.
Yeah.
They're cute. They're adorable.
I've watched you this year and you have just loved it. And your
Mhm.
face lights up every time you talk about it and you talk about your day or, when you're introducing the next letter and the next sound and all of that stuff and the accomplishments that they've had. And, so it's been very great to watch you.
I always want to stress the point. I know that I have changed grade levels a lot, but I feel that is what has gotten me to year 5 going into year 6 without feeling burnout. One of the reasons that I almost didn't go into education was I was like, oh my gosh, teaching the same thing year after year, that sounds miserable to me. But I have changed and I've been able to switch it up. And so I really do feel like that is what has kept my perspective fresh and it's what's kept me excited is exploring new things. So,
And I got in my grade band 3 through
mhm.
5, third, fourth, fifth, stayed there, loved it. Probably would have been content, I think, almost to retire there. Fifth was my absolute favorite. But then was pulled out for instructional coach and, everything changed after that. So yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about the roles that we've had,
Yeah.
but we've also had some differences in our journey to the classroom and teaching. So I'll go ahead and I'll let you start and talk about how you became Mrs. Hanlon.
Okay. So and are you kind of wanting me to go through how my struggle is different than yours? Is that where we're headed?
I'm sure, absolutely,
Okay.
yes. Just
So
share what your little heart wants to share.
okay. So well, thanks, dear. So I got my degree in elementary education and loved it and was so excited to go to the university that I went to. As you all know, um as after I graduated, when I was graduating high school, I actually had a different career in mind and was going to a different university. And then I just after teaching Sunday school and Bible school and piano lessons and tutoring and all the stuff that I had done, I thought I have to go into teaching. I can't believe I even considered something else, even temporarily. So I changed schools and I was so proud of the university that I was going to. It was known kind of really as a teacher college. And so I went there and I felt so equipped when I left there to get into teaching. And I just dove into my career, loved it. Loved it. Did set up small group instruction. Got some pushback for that from my first building principal, but I was doing that. I've always loved teaching literacy. I must say that was always my favorite. I loved all the subjects I got to teach, but I think that was kind of the part of the day where I truly came to life. But then I'd been in the classroom about 10 years, and this is where our journeys are quite different. I went to a professional development day. Thank God for this professional development day. Dr. Vicki Gibson came to our school district, and I had been searching. I was doing, like I said, small group instruction, but I couldn't reach every single student. And I'm like, why can I not get better gains from this? And my scores, as far as our district was concerned, were quite good. And I was actually being praised for them, 55% proficiency, 60, 65%. But I had never gotten over 65% proficiency. And I still felt like I'm failing, right at 40%. Like, oh my gosh, why can I not do this? And so at that time, I was doing what I thought was differentiated instruction. And then Dr. Vicki Gibson came and did an all-day professional learning session for us. And it just completely changed my whole career, changed my life. She started talking about the science and this body of research. At the time, it didn't really have this coined phrase of the science of reading. She just kept saying the research and the science. And so she starts talking about all these things that we need to be doing in our classrooms to reach our students with in education, especially in literacy. And I sat there in that chair and thought, why does every teacher not know this? Why on earth am I hearing this for the very first time? And I was a literacy, language and literature minor. I had done a double minor in language and then also in literature and fiction and everything. I was shocked of hearing this for the very first time. I peppered her with questions at each break and everything. And then that put me on this path to truly explore the science. I began to shadow her, follow her work with her. She became a true mentor, brought in Dr. Jan Hasbrook to be a mentor. And then I learned about explicit instruction and all of these things. Anita Archer, Doug Fisher, John Hattie, all of these things that completely changed my life. So when I look back, I actually wasn't prepared for the classroom. I do think I was prepared for reaching students, having a connection with students, maybe classroom management, those types of things. I had training in lesson plan development, but it ended up being nothing like what I ended up doing after reading the research and the book Explicit Instruction by Anita Archer. So that was my journey that led me to the classroom. Yours is different than that, though. So tell us about yours.
Very different.
Yeah, very
Well,
different. You're lucky.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if I would say
Lucky.
but I'll explain and let the viewers, let the listeners come to their own conclusion about that. So I feel that my journey to the classroom, it started the day you went to that professional development training. I was maybe in the age range, I don't remember exactly, but I was anywhere from 8 to 11 years old when that happened. And you would come home every single night, and we always ate dinner as a family. And
Yes.
every single night at the dinner table, you would talk about all of these things that you were learning and all of these things that you were implementing in your classroom. And I remember being amazed because I was always just a little learner, and I
Yeah.
loved to read, and I loved to go to school, and I loved learning. So hearing you talk about these things is revolutionary for me. But when I look back now, it was also sad because I was having to sit at the dinner table and listen to my mother that I adored talk about everything that she was giving her students. And I was realizing that I wasn't getting that myself. And that was very hard for me. I was actually just explaining to my fiance and my sister in law last night. We were talking about classroom read alouds because, we're all teachers. And we were talking about classroom read alouds. And I said, the read alouds that I know and the read alouds that I love to implement, I would go to my school library or my town library and I would get because my mom was reading them to her class at the time. I don't remember having a lot of teachers do read alouds and read to me. And maybe they did and I just, don't remember. But I remember I would listen to what you were reading with your kids
Yeah.
and then I would go get it and I would read
You
it for myself and you and I would talk about it.
Yeah.
But I also saw, you said when you started, transforming literacy is hard work.
Yeah.
It is hard work. A lot of people do not want to do it and they push back. And I have seen people be vile and I have seen people be ugly. And I thought to myself when I was about 15, 16 years old, oh, there's no way that I'm going into that. That sounds horrible to me. I want to be a lawyer. I want to be a prosecuting attorney. If I can work my way into medical malpractice and be a medical malpractice attorney, that sounds better to me than what my mother's going through as a teacher. But then, as I got ready for college, I was sitting in church one Sunday morning. It was 2 weeks before my freshman year of college started. And I was like, you know what? All of the things that I possess that make me think I would be a good attorney are things that would make me an even better teacher. I had been to a pre-law and trial camp where my peers, they were like, listen, you're great at this, but you're great at it because you're teaching the mock jury. That's why you're great at this, is because you're sitting down and you're breaking down the information and you're teaching it to them. They were like, you need to teach high school English. And I was like, would you people stop saying this to me? I don't want to teach. I just don't want to do it.
You did resist it for a long time
long
because I thought you'd be great too.
long
And you're like, I don't even want to talk about it. Yep.
Yep. And you knew me well enough that you couldn't sit down and say, hey, listen, this is what you need to do. You knew that you needed to
Yep.
let me come to that on my own. So I pulled you in my bedroom that Sunday after church and I was like, Mom, I've got to change my major. And you were like, no, you don't. Do not feel that I'm putting that on you because I am not putting that on you. And I was like, Mom, no, I genuinely mean this. And you started crying and you hugged me and you said, finally, you've realized it and you're going to be great. And so that was Sunday. I went Monday and I sat down with my advisor who played a very important part in my college years. And we changed my major to education, and that's where it started. But very soon as I got into my education classes, I realized, oh, no. This is not preparing me for the classroom. And I heard time and time again, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
That's not good enough when I'm responsible for educating someone's child. I need to know everything I can. So I started living at your elementary school. I was in classrooms all the time, observing and soaking in as much as I possibly could. And I say to people all the time, if you had not been elementary principal, I would not be the teacher that I am and that I'm still working to become. Because
Totally.
you gave me the best mentors that I ever could have had. And I'm going to name drop because she's just so phenomenal. If I had never stepped foot into Sarah Lawson's classroom, I would not be a good teacher.
She's one of the best I've ever seen. Yeah.
Yes, she is. And, even though you are no longer her principal, we don't even live in the same state. If I have a difficult situation in my classroom, she is my first text.
Yeah. She's
When I was
incredible.
when I was asked to move to fourth grade, I texted her and I said, "What do you think about this? I know it will be the same curriculum that you use. Like, do you think this is something I could implement? Do you think this is something that I could do?" And then follow up questions of, "Well, what do you do for this? And what do you do for that?" And so she's still a very important piece of my education journey. So,
I remember when you were doing the data and assessment class, you called me
mm,
and you said, these assessment programs that you've heard from Dr. Gibson that like aren't, I'm not going to say their names, but that they aren't good. And you read the title. I'm like, oh my goodness, is the college still teaching that assessment? And you're like, yes, what do I do? And I said, well, you have to do that to be compliant in your classroom, but just know there's so many better
there's
things that we
more.
need to be doing. Yeah, there's so
Yes.
much more. And so then when you were in college, you took the part-time intervention position in our district and you were in all the data team meetings, and then you actually really saw what data analysis needs to look like, that we don't need to find these levels and reading levels and all of this stuff, that we actually need to find the fluency levels, and we need to
Yes.
find the percentiles, and
Mhm.
and you
And
saw what the
accuracy.
assessments, yes, and you saw what the assessments really needed to be. So I did not realize, I mean, you're my daughter and we talk all the time, but I don't think I realized the part my part of the journey had
Mhm.
played in yours.
Oh,
So
yes. I mean,
thanks for sharing
you
that.
know, a lot of people, if they don't know us, they don't realize that my younger brother is a teacher too.
Yeah.
And, we've both talked about our life became literacy and teaching everyone how to read. That's what our life became. And Garrett and I have both talked about, that's my brother's name, Garrett. But we've both talked about how like we would be sitting in school next to a child that may have been struggling. And Garrett and I would start like helping them with the strategies that you were saying at home. I remember giving someone a colored index card one time to put under a line of text, you
Yeah.
know? So that's just truly, not only did you transform literacy for your kids, but literacy transformed our family as
Oh,
well.
my
Mhm.
goodness. Okay. Well, thank you. I'm trying not to get emotional over that. Okay. All right. So let's move on.
So we are now to the piece of today's episode where we would like to talk about our hopes for the podcast. So, Mother Angela, what are your hopes for this podcast? What do you hope to do? You're a very busy woman, and you, for some reason, think that you need to carve out even more time, and you're already insane schedule to do this. So, what are your hopes? What are you trying to accomplish?
I want to get the message out. One, that all means all. Every single child can learn to read. Every single child is capable of learning to read. Every single teacher can learn how to not only teach a child to read, but to teach a student and have an impact on their lives. From John Hattie, I've learned the phrase change agent, that
Yes.
we are the change agent in that classroom. Dr. Anita Archer has a phrase, and it completely changed me. How well we teach equals how well they learn. And I've seen what's possible. I know it is possible. I said I know it is possible. Reminds me, I'm now been able to have the extreme privilege of co-authoring a book that's called It's Possible. But even without that book and without that title, I've always believed that it truly is possible for every single student to learn. And then when I experienced that transformation in my teaching career, I remember going to my best friend. She's still my closest friend, Christy, who was a coworker. And I said to her through tears, every single teacher has to know this information. It is life changing, not only for us, but also for our students, because we can have such a strong impact on their learning. So I learned to take the focus off of the teaching and to place it on the learning. And when we do that, it is just it's a game changer. And
Yes, it is.
I've seen the difference it makes in a classroom. I've now seen the difference it makes in a school. I've seen the difference it makes in a district. And you know this about me. I want to give literally every breath I have, not to be dramatic, but just to my dying breath, to help every single educator, every teacher, every leader know what's possible. And not just that, but to know what to do in their classroom to make that happen. I realized after I started getting high quality professional development that I had sat through professional development sessions, but I had not been truly professionally developed. I had heard a great presentation. Maybe the speaker was lively and engaging, but it did not professionally develop me. It
Mhm.
did not create in me professional growth.
Right.
And so I want that for every single educator. And so through my consulting work, I started seeing, because, I was just going to be content to do just this piece of it. But then I started having conversations with you, and it was really bothering me this discouragement I am seeing in teachers
Mhm.
with the NAEP scores and with their data. And I'm seeing excellent teachers who have been so committed wanting to leave the field of education. I've also seen teachers that are working so hard. And this is what happened when I became a principal. I saw teachers who cared so much about their students. They loved their students. They loved teaching. They were giving it all they had with what they knew. They were doing all they knew to do. Yet they were so discouraged because of where their data was.
Right.
Oh, and when we started that journey, 13% proficiency. And Christy and Sarah, that we've mentioned, who are going to be in a later podcast, but they both were ready to just walk. Christy, especially, was ready to just leave the field of education. And that grieves me because it is still, I feel, the greatest profession ever because we have the power and the opportunity every single day to walk in the doors of our school, and if we're a teacher, in the doors of our classroom, and change the life of a child. And when we give them literacy, we literally pick them up off the path they're on and put them on a different pathway. And it's no longer a path to poverty or prison, but
Right.
it's a path with opportunities and choices. And I know in my own life, education saved me. It
Mhm.
put me on a different path and, first college graduate in my family. And I look at what literacy and what education did for me. And as educators, I just cannot get over that we have the career and the profession where every single day we can make a difference. How many people get to say that? That every single solitary
Right.
day they can go to school and they can truly make a difference in the lives of their students and the people around them. And so I know how empowering this work is, not only for educators, but also for students. And not to sound like Pollyanna, but I truly want this for every single educator and every single school in our
Mhm.
country and beyond. And so I know that literacy in this country can be transformed. I know right now we're sitting at an average of about 31% can read. You round that down to 30. That means
Yep.
70% are not doing it, but they can. They aren't there yet, but they can, and we can get them there. So I'm honestly just on a mission to do that. And I want a spot for teachers where they can come and do a couple of things. One, come together to learn, but also come together and have a place to be inspired. because
Mhm.
I remember having to really seek that spot out, find my community. And Dr. Vicki Gibson gave me those people that I could look at and inspire. And she gave me the right places to look and showed me the correct authors and the valid research. And I want this also to be that type of resource where we're actually putting out the evidence, the science, the evidence-based practices. And I want teachers to leave with what they can, with a takeaway that they can go to their room, implement to truly make the changes. What they need to go in their room, say out of their mouths to their students' ears to have an impact.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, that was beautiful. I'm not even going to add anything to that.
Well, thank you.
Next, we're going to
I'm a
hit on the
carried
point.
away. I'm sorry. I got a bit carried away on that.
No, you're good. It was wonderful. Our next question is going to be, what do we want? What do you want every classroom to look like? And before you answer, I'm going to take just a moment and explain what that question means for our
Okay.
viewers, for our listeners.
Okay.
What do we want every classroom to look like? I could care less what your classroom theme is. I love to decorate my classroom. I love to make it personal for the kids, but that's not what this question is. So maybe instead of what do we want your classroom to look like, we should really focus on what do we want every classroom to feel like?
So when learning is happening, and I'm taking all of this from my experience from the work of John Hattie, Invisible Learning.
Mhm.
And when it happens, it does become visible.
Right.
But it's more than that. After living that visible learning transformation, it's more than just it's more than just visible. It's literally something you feel.
Mhm.
And I can tell
Me
you it
here.
is
Mhm.
and here, yeah, but it is not only powerful, it is addictive. And I wanted more of it. And so when I started down this journey, you have stayed friends with some of the students, but I actually said to the students, hey, my instruction's getting ready to look different. I'm learning new things. I'm getting ready to go on this journey of learning new things. We're going to go on this together. I invited them in. And in looking back, I feel like, and I did not know it at the time, there's so much guilt I think that teachers are experiencing now too. I should have said that a minute ago because that's part of what I want to help ease. But in really true reflection of my practices, I think I spent a lot of time teaching at students and to students
Mhm.
and not engaging them. They are the learner. I know the content. They are the learner. I was so busy focused on the teaching that I wasn't putting my emphasis on the learning. And I had the learning intention, but I don't know that I always shared it aloud with the students. But they are the learner. It's their learning target, their learning objective, their intention, whatever you want to call it. So through visible learning, it changed the way my classroom looked, the way it felt, the things we did. So I really want classrooms to have this feeling in them where all all are learning because there's nothing for a child student of any age. I even know for myself as an adult I still love to learn. There's nothing like the power of learning, but setting goals for those students, letting them know those three questions I've learned from John Addy. Where are we? Where are we going? These.
And how
And
will we get there?
yes, and how close are we to reaching that goal and how are we going to get there? But giving that goal to the student and having them embrace that learning, sharing a learning intention. This is what I want a classroom to look like and sound like. Have a clear learning intention that we post, that we share aloud with students. It can be an I can statement. Students will be able to, or every student will be able to, or students will learn, if you really want to put it on learning. but have that clear learning intention that we explicitly share with those students. And where all of our instruction is explicit, it's systematic. I'm pulling that from the research. That's not just Angie saying that. That's what we know from that body of research in the science of reading. Our instruction needs to be explicit and systematic, because I tell you, when it becomes explicit, it fixes so many things.
Yes, it does.
Behaviors decrease. Engagement goes through the roof because the students are literally sitting there hanging on your every word, and they're waiting for the next thing that they're going to learn. And then when we then have that success criteria, where we tell them, when we give them the learning intention, this is what I intend for you to learn in this lesson. And then here's the success criteria. This is how I am going to know if you have successfully learned it. And we give them that before we even provide the instruction. How powerful is that for the student? And I taught so many lessons without doing that. And then it should not come as a surprise, and it definitely doesn't to me now, knowing what I know. I didn't reach every learner. I would reach some, maybe the really bright ones or the lucky ones, or those compliant learners that would kind of go along with the lessons regardless. But then I started reaching all. And after we've posted that learning intention and we've shared it, that we're giving the relevance and we're explaining why this is important and when you're going to use it and where you're going to use it. And my goodness, if there's a real world application, go through that with them. But tell them why it matters. Why does this learning matter? Why is it that you need to know it? Is this a skill or a strategy that a really strong reader has? Is it something that you have to know to be successful in the upper grades? Is this something that you have to know to be a skilled reader? What's the significance of it? But then also having lessons that have been explicitly designed. I remember learning that explicit instruction. I was for so many years, thought that was only the delivery piece. And from Anita Archer, I learned it's the design and the delivery. And I love coaching teachers on that now. And so you can walk in a classroom and tell immediately, literally within the first few minutes, if this has truly been a really explicitly designed lesson. But I want those types of lessons going on in school where students are engaged in that learning and not just engaged in compliance engagement, where the teacher says something and the students echo. The students or the teacher claps out the syllables and then the students clap out the syllables. No, that their minds are truly engaged in the content and in the learning. And then they can assess at the end, have I learned it? What is still a struggle? On a rubric, to what level do I understand this? What questions do I still have? What do I hope that you're going to tell me as the teacher tomorrow? And then that feedback where we're giving it to the students and getting it from them. And then when that happens, the look of the room changes because your walls start working for you. How many times have you heard me preach that to you when you were getting your rooms ready? But we've got anchor charts in there that the walls are working for us. I remember decorating my room with so many things that I never used. I never used those things, and changing bulletin boards out for every season. And I'm not saying teachers, please hear me clearly. I'm not saying I don't want that to stop in classrooms, but I'm saying I had this anchor bulletin board that was a focus wall. And it had my essential question and my story title and my character and setting and events and my skill for the week and my strategies that we were really focused on at that time. And our vocabulary words, and this explicit vocabulary that we really need to be sharing with an explicit, systematic vocabulary approach. And that is what I dream of classrooms looking and sounding like,
Yes.
because it's not only empowering and just career altering for teachers, but it's life changing for children. And I've seen it take students from having behavior problems to no one being off task. You don't have time to be off task. And also seeing students that were not performing, so they never wanted to come to school, and experiencing chronic absenteeism to getting there early, on their
Right.
little bikes and
Mhm.
walking and waiting for you to open the doors
Right.
to get there because they couldn't wait to get
Okay.
there. But
Well,
that's
I'm gonna
exactly
stop.
what I want.
Okay, good. I'm gonna stop you there. Our next question, and I know this is, believe it or not, this next question is actually her soapbox, what she could talk about for
Oh
days and
gosh, I felt
and
like I was
days
just on
and
one.
days.
Oh my
Days.
goodness.
Well,
Okay.
you were, but like a baby soapbox. This is
Okay.
like your platform.
Okay.
So let's keep this one short. I just want to see. I'm going to give you a challenge in a few sentences.
Oh
Okay, so
my.
not Nathaniel Hawthorne sentences. Let's not be
Fine.
using colons and commas.
Yeah,
In just a few
I
sentences,
gotcha.
what do you want every leader to know?
Oh, that they can do it. That they can
Yes.
do it. And it takes a leader to transform this work. Patty Montgomery writes a sentence in the book, It's Possible, that says she's never seen this happen without a leader at the helm. And it is so true. We've got to have instructional leaders leading our schools. And they are the instructional leader. They are driving the instruction. They're having you're right. This is my soapbox. Sorry. They're having the instructional conversations with teachers. They're going in the rooms. They're coaching. They're supporting. They're knowing the systems that we have to have that highly successful schools have in them. They are building those and they're developing the culture in the
Yes.
school where this can happen for the teachers and for the students, period. There you go.
Absolutely. That
Kept
was
that one short and
perfection.
concise.
Yes, challenge accepted, and you killed it. Good job.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so we just explained what you want every leader to know. As we go throughout this podcast series, we're going to have episodes dedicated to how, as an instructional leader, you build leaders in your school. You
Yeah.
must be developing future leaders because, as the principal, as the instructional coach, you are not going to be there forever. You are eventually going to move on to greater things, or you are going to retire, and you have to have someone who can step in and lead your team through a seamless transition. So we have to be developing future leaders, but we also have to let teachers lead from their classrooms. We have to have the teachers who are doing this work, who are putting up phenomenal data that we can then exemplify and tell other teachers, come see what so and so is doing. Don't get jealous. Come watch what so and so is
Yeah.
doing and then go back and do it in your room.
Yeah.
We're also going to talk about how to show everyone how to be a part of a team. There are so many teachers that are like, well, I never want to be a principal, so I don't need to be a leader. Okay. And, that's accurate. Some people are completely fine and content to stay in the classroom for forever. But that doesn't mean that you're not a leader. You can be a leader within your own room, but we also need to show people how to come together and how to work as a team, because a good, successful team, every single person plays a crucial role. It might not be a leadership role, it might be a support role, but those support roles are equally, if not more important. And then we're also going to talk about how to embrace the data and not be defeated by it. That is so hard. That is something that I still struggle with today. I feel like a lot of people that, they like learning, they were a good student, so then they've become a teacher and they want to be a good teacher. We have those perfectionist tendencies. So when the data is not perfect, we instantly feel horrible. I, this school year, put up the best data that I have ever put up. And I kid you not, I was like, well, maybe my goal was too low. Couldn't be happy with the fact that every single student in my class, I finally hit the 100%. I did it. And I was like, thank you.
You're welcome.
I was like, oh my God, did I hit the 100% because the goal was too low? Am I still horrible? You
Yeah.
know, and so we also, embracing the data. I love you are so big on telling teachers that you are part of closing the gap because
Yeah.
it may take more than one school year to close the gap. And that's why we have to work as a team. We have to know, okay, this is what I'm providing them this year, and this is the growth that they're going to make. But here's what you're going to have to do in the next grade level to follow that up and to help close that gap. So just really embracing the data, seeing it for what it is, and then changing it.
And and I almost said this sentence when we decided to call this Grit and Grace. I've got to change that. That's you, I'll give it
Yes,
to you.
it is.
When you talked about grit and grace, I was saying that it takes both on the literacy journey.
Right.
And I really want us to kind of talk about that as we start to wrap up this first episode. But the place that I've seen where that's needed, I feel the most, is in a data team meeting.
Yes.
Because I've seen teachers sit there and cry. I've seen teachers sit there and say, I'm a complete failure. I've seen teachers sit there and get so defensive and take it so personally. Because, and honestly, I get that. At the time, years ago, I was like, how can you not? Someone said to me, don't take it personally. And I immediately came back at them. How can I not take that
Right.
personally? I'm giving all I have to
Mhm.
accomplish this, and the scores are not where I want them to be. There's no other way to take it but personally. But I feel like what I mentioned earlier, what we were talking about, when we put the focus on the learning and not on the teaching, and say it's not that we didn't teach it. Yeah, we did teach it. They didn't learn it. So what do we need to go back to our room and do? How do we need to change our instruction so that they will learn it? I do think that takes some of that pressure off. But in Grit and Grace, one of the things I really want to explore is how to take that data and not get defensive over it, but look at every data team meeting as an opportunity for professional growth, as an
Yes.
opportunity to solve problems as a team, to come together and really look at, well, okay, you got better data on that. So what did you do? And that's, as a school, I feel like that's one of the markers of like, okay, we're doing the right work. When people start saying that, wait a second, how did you get that? How did you get that 75% of your students there? How did you do that? Because I'm at 43 and I want to be there. So what is it that you're doing that I'm not doing? Um, but it takes grit, but it also takes grace to ourselves and grace to others. And so embracing the data is something we have to do. We have to own it because, like that question when John Addy, where are we? Well, that's where we are. But I always like to say, but it's okay because it's not where we're staying, you know? So we are. That is a topic that, as you know, I love to talk about. So that's something that we'll be embracing. I said embrace the data. So now I'll say we'll be really embracing that discussion as we go forward in the
Yes.
conversations.
And, I feel like the greatest takeaway for today's episode should be we ultimately want to inspire teachers to go forth and teach all. We want
All,
all teachers to teach all
all,
students.
all.
Mhm.
And I've been saying recently, working with teachers, we say all means all. I mean, it's a very catchy phrase. We say all means all, but especially in a data team meeting, this is where I hear this the most. We might say all means all, but I
But
want an exclamation mark. I want an exclamation mark there.
not a comma.
But then we'll put a comma. We'll say, oh, but, and I have teachers, these are just things that have been said to me. But now, Angie, they have an IEP. Yeah, but now that child's being referred for special education, but they have dyslexia. There's so much trauma in their life. Yeah, but now they're free lunch. Or, yeah, but everyone in that family has struggled. Oh my God, just stop. Stop. We have to stop that. And we've got to stop, doing all of those buts, all of those excuses, because there are instructional practices, there are evidence-based practices that we can implement in our rooms to overcome all of those things, to trump all of them. And it's not a deal breaker. And every single child truly can learn.
They can. And even as a classroom teacher, even as your child, I even still feel guilty sometimes of putting the but at the end of that sentence. But when you're
It's hard
spending
not
every
to.
single day,
And I get
yes,
it.
when
It's hard not to.
yes, when you're spending every single day in a classroom with these kids and you see all of them, you see every single piece of that individual child and you see the trauma. And while you're teaching them how to learn, you're also teaching them how to cope and how to deal and what they can do to relieve some of those stressors in their life. It's then hard to not connect that to the data because you're teaching, you're teaching them how to overcome and you're also teaching them how to learn. So it's a very fine line, and we have to be very careful as educators.
Yeah. But so often, I think part of the disconnect is the teachers sit in those meetings and they don't leave there with a plan.
Exactly.
They
Yes.
don't leave with a plan. I sat through so many. And when we started doing our work as a building leader, and when I looked back at how we had looked at data as a teacher, we had never gone to that depth. I never left those. I never left as a teacher. I never left a data team meeting with a plan to go back in my room for how then to intervene or what to say and what to do at my small group teaching table to close that gap. But I think if we, as instructional leaders, get to the point where we're giving our teachers that and our interventionists that, our special ed teachers that, in those meetings, then you don't feel defeated because then you can leave those meetings encouraged because you have a plan to go back
Right.
and you know what you need to do. So, you know, when you came up with Grit and Grace and said it means both, you kind of felt like one of us had a little bit more, and I know that you kind of wanted to address. I see your
Yes. We'll keep
smile.
this quick as we'll
Wanted to
keep this
address
quick as
that
well.
for
Mhm.
our kind of final closing here for our first episode.
Yes. Yes, we'll keep this quick as well because you're really, to see which one of us is grit and, which one of us is grace. You're going to find that out as you continue to
I
listen with
will.
our opinions and our views and our thoughts. But I will definitely say, and you kind of heard this when I talked about how I even came to be a teacher. I've had to use grit every single day in my career of, okay, that person just really ticked me off with what they said about that kid and how they don't think that kid can learn or how they are just here for a paycheck. So I'm just going to have to go into my classroom and I'm just going to have to power through and I'm just going to have to do this. Or seeing that kid that's just pitiful. They hate coming to school. They're overwhelmed. Their home life is pitiful. And then when they get to school, they don't feel success as a learner and having to sit there and think, okay, here we go. I am doing whatever it takes to make it possible for this child. I've also, in a lot of situations, I've seen people push back against you or do things, say things to or about you that I did not agree with. And it has been, all right, nope, I'm going to be the best resource that she has. I'm going to go into this room. I'm going to try my darndest. I'm going to try my best to really employ these things that she talks about. And I've got to be a mouthpiece. I have got to be the example that she can use. I'm not quite there yet. I'm really working on it. I'm really working on it. I want you to be proud of me. I want you to be like, well,
I
look, this is
am.
what my daughter can do. I don't want you
I
to be
am
like, oh,
proud of
yeah,
you.
yeah. I have a daughter who's a teacher. She's real bad, but she is a teacher. So, mine has been a lot of grit. It doesn't matter what other people say, it does not matter what other people think. Ultimately, I'm going to go in my classroom and I'm going to do what is best for my children. I might not have a lot of friends in my building, I might not make a lot of people happy, but I'm doing what's best for those kids, and my kids are going to be different because of it.
And I'm proud of you. Proud of you
Thank
for that. So as you know, I mean, I've definitely had to rely on both grit and grace throughout my career in education. Grit has truly been essential for me. It is what pushed me through some of the most challenging and frustrating moments in my life and career. And I'm not going to share those things today, but I am looking forward to actually having an opportunity to share some of those stories throughout this podcast as we go forward, because there have been a lot of bumps in the road. But if I'm being completely honest, I think I've had to lean even more on grace.
Yes.
I especially had to extend grace to myself when I first learned about the science of reading. I was shocked. I was honestly, if I had to describe it, truly devastated that I had been teaching school for nearly a decade, just had put so much time and energy into being. I wanted to be a great teacher, not a good teacher, a great teacher. Um, Yet I'd never been taught this body of research. So I actually called my university out of frustration. And I'm like, how is it that I went 4.5 years, had this minor in language and literature, and how is it that I don't know this? Why do teachers not know this information? So the guilt I felt for that and for the students that I had taught without that knowledge was completely overwhelming to me. It truly was. And I remember the moment when I thought I need to write apology letters to every student and their families and their parents that I had worked with before. And I wrote that letter and took the principal, and he's like, "Oh, no, we do not need to do that." But I felt like that's what I needed to do. But then Grace reminded me. So I had to extend grace first to myself. Grace reminded me that I could not have known what I had never been taught. But once I did know better, holy moly, it became my passion, my mission, my responsibility, literally my mission to do better and to do it right and to get it right and to help the others around me get it right. So I took that energy and I turned it then into action. And I shared with my students, like I said earlier, we're going on this journey together. I was transparent with the parents, my coworkers, everybody. But I've also had to extend grace to others along the way. I have been challenged. I've been discouraged. Unfortunately, I've even been threatened, like for teaching and leading differently. I've had conversations with leaders and principals who questioned my methods. Oh, one of my darkest moments, I had a principal that was actually telling me not to do small group instruction anymore. And I told that principal I would bet my scores on my job. And I said, if my scores don't reflect the impact of my instruction, and if they don't show great growth at the end of the year, I promise you, I'm giving you my word right now, I will resign. But that year, at the end of the year, on the end of year state assessment, my student scores had the highest proficiency scores we had ever reached. So I was able to keep my job. But then I went into leadership, and oh boy, grace takes on a whole new form, because leadership will teach you all about grace and needing to use it and extend it to others, because it's in those tough conversations, it's in those hard decisions, it's in that moment when we're holding space for others while, managing our own challenges, and the data's not where we need it to be. The school's not where it needs to be. So grace to me is kindness, and we should give it freely. It's extending patience, compassion, poise, grace when it isn't easy, and even when it's not deserved, but still extending it because it helps establish the culture, that culture that we need, and builds trust that we need in schools to do this work right and to do it well. So even though I've used grit and I still do that, I think that without grace, I don't think I would have made it. I don't think I would have made it through the obstacles in my path. I definitely would not have made it as a leader. And so it's a gift we give ourselves, I think, first. And then it's a gift we also extend to others. And paired with grit, that word and, grit and grace, it becomes a very powerful force for change
Yeah.
and empowerment and education.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've met grit, you've met grace, and we want to be a part of your journey. We want to hear from you and see which are you. Do you rely on grit? Do you rely on grace? We
Both.
also want you to leave here. We want you to be inspired. We are here, Grit and Grace, a literacy journey. We are here. We want every leader, every teacher, every parent, and every child to know that this is possible.
It is.
So, with that, we bid you farewell, and I just want to remind you that Grit and Grace, a literacy journey, is an Angela Hanlon and Associates production. Please check us out online. Mom, remind everyone, what's your website title?
It is Angela Hanlon and Associates, and it is at angelahanlon.com.
All right, perfect. We cannot wait to speak to you again. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye.
Grit